Now, this time yesterday, the Brexit Secretary, David Davis, was holding a press conference in Brussels to announce agreement on a transition deal with the EU, which covers the implementation period from next March until the end of 2020. Mr Davis said it was a decisive step in the Brexit process.
The United Kingdom will be able to step out, sign and ratify new deals, new trade deals with old friends and new allies around the globe for the first time in more than 40 years. These will come into force when the implementation period is over, providing new opportunities for businesses across the United Kingdom and seizing one of Brexit's greatest opportunities.
Well, that was the Brexit Secretary, David Davis, yesterday. Let's get some reaction from you first. Anand, how big a moment was this, do you think? David Davis seemed to think it was. Was it?
It was certainly a big moment for a lot of companies in this country who'd been crying out for this agreement so they didn't have to trigger contingency plans. So in that sense, it was definitely a step forward. But, you know, to cite the old saying, nothing's agreed till everything's agreed.
Which
so
Michel Barnier said.
Absolutely. And I believe Jacob Rees-Mogg said yesterday as well. So both sides are citing that line. So there's a long way to go before this is all wrapped up and signed and sealed.
How much did the government give way, in your mind?
Well, there are some areas on the transition deal where they clearly gave way. So, for instance, the rights of EU citizens who arrived during transition. Initially, the Prime Minister said they won't have the same rights as EU citizens who arrived before Brexit Day. Now they will. And, of course, we're going to have to abide by new EU laws. So I think on transition, the government gave way on most of the points that the EU was insisting on, to be honest.
Did the EU give way as well?
No, I think the EU has given way on some of the withdrawal points. So on the rights of EU citizens, they backed off their initial demands. But on transition, the EU seemed to have got pretty much what they wanted.
Were you surprised by the storm that seems to have been created over fishing rights?
Yes and no. I mean, there are lots of different constituencies involved in the Brexit vote, and fishing, of course, was something where the government had been saying quite early on, and Brexiters have said, we're going to reclaim our fishing waters. This is a direct and clear contradiction that affects specific people's lives. So in that sense, it was fairly predictable.
Right. Well, with us here in the studio to discuss all this, Conservative MP Nigel Evans and the Labour MP Alison McGovern. Welcome to both of you. Nigel Evans, let's pick up on the fishing rights. Take back control. Have the fishermen and people who wanted to take back control of British waters and fishing rights, have they been betrayed by this deal?
No, they haven't. I was just looking for Jacob Rees-Mogg and one of those trawlers over Anand's shoulder there. No, the reality is that we're going to be in no worse off position during the transition period. It could be better because it's going to be open to negotiation. And at the end of the period when we leave, so that's after the transitional period, then we will have taken back control of our waters. So one area where I find completely odd, though, is Nicola Sturgeon saying that this has let down the Scottish fishermen. Because, quite frankly, if we stuck with what Nicola Sturgeon wants, we'd be in the European Union for eternity, and we wouldn't have any control even in 2020 on our fishing waters.
But it's not just Nicola Sturgeon, is it? It's Tory MPs, Scottish Tories, who met with the Chief Whip and were told to sort of stop whining because it's not like fishermen are going to vote Labour. Is that the way to deal with your colleagues?
No, certainly not. And I know that they're meeting with the Prime Minister today, so that's how important that is being taken. They've met with Michael Gove as well. And we just want to make absolutely certain that in the whole mix we do, when we finally do leave the European Union after the transitional period, that we've got total control of our waters. We are leaving the common fisheries policy, and we will be able to get the very best deal for our fishermen.
I mean, do you accept, Alison McGovern? I mean, you very much are still behind the idea of remaining within the EU, but do you accept that this was a moment that some success and progress has been made?
Well, I think there's two problems with what's happened over transition. The first of those problems is that many of the big decisions are still being kicked down the road. So whether that's the position of Ireland or what our eventual relationship will be, we still don't know. So a lot of us talked about the importance of a transition a lot, you know, when the vote first happened, precisely for the reason that Anand mentioned earlier, which is that businesses would need a long lead-in to deal with whatever the eventual situation was. But if that long lead-in is still really a road to nowhere, what are we really talking about? You know, we still don't really know what our relationship is going to be. The second problem is, to be quite honest, you know, people like Nigel went round in 2016 telling people, when we leave the EU, we'll take back control, we'll have control of fisheries, we'll have control of our borders. And now, you know, they're being told, actually, I'm terribly sorry, but, you know, that's not really what's on offer anymore. And I don't think that is good enough, really, for people in Britain, whether they voted Leave or Remain. You know, I think people were told they could have something, and now they're being told, actually, we're just going to have open borders. You know, it's not really fair on people, and I think that's a huge problem.
Nigel?
No, we've got a pragmatic approach to the negotiations, which is quite right. I thought it was rather bizarre to see Michel Barnier and David Davis standing behind that board full of sheets with a lot with green ink over it to show that where agreements had been made and some where agreements have still yet to happen. And I agree with Alison on this. If it is a road to nowhere, then I'd be totally opposed to it. But it is actually a road to leaving the European Union so that at the end of 2020, after the transitional arrangements, both Alison and I can have a drink of champagne in the Strangers Bar, celebrating our independence.
I don't think I will, Nigel.
I'll buy.
Actually,
I'll buy.
No, thanks. That's
right.
fine. But
That was clear.
you know, I'm sorry, but the issue of Northern Ireland, we're absolutely no further on than we were before. In order to not have an effective border, we need to be in a single market. And you know, the government is not at all dealing with that issue.
Okay. Right, do you agree? Yes, you come in, I must go.
Just on this, because Alison is saying, unless we stay in the single market, well, even Jeremy Corbyn isn't offering that. They're looking at some sort of fudged customs union, whatever that happens.
Do you accept that would make it easier to solve the Irish and Northern Irish question?
We're not going to do that.
Yeah, but would it make it easier?
No, we're not going to do it. We are leaving the single market, we're leaving the customs union, but we've already said, Theresa May has said, there is going to be no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
Do you agree with Alison McGovern on this point? About that border, that hasn't yet been resolved. It is being kicked further down the road. And by doing so, does it increase the chances of a solution being found or not?
Well, there are two bits to that. I do agree with Ali on the fact that if you're not in the single market and the customs union, it is almost impossible. No one has come up with a way of avoiding a border. Now, the government talks about technology, but remember, the agreement doesn't just say no border. It says no physical infrastructure. Now, technology means cameras, which is physical infrastructure. No one has come up with a way of removing that border short of single market and customs union membership yet. So that is still very much open to discussion. I suspect what the government want to do is play chicken with the Irish in a sense. They want to drag this out for as long as possible because the Irish have two problems. One, they don't want a border, but two, they want to continue trading with us. And the government wants to push the border issue into the trade talks.
But the point, Anand, is that the European Union wanted to put the cart before the horse. And when you do that, it's amazing the cart doesn't go really all that far. What we need to do is to deal with the UK-EU border, and if we get that right, which we want to do a trade deal with them, and now we can get on with that, then the whole problem between Northern Ireland and Ireland disappears.
It certainly doesn't, I'm afraid, because you know the idea that a trade deal gets rid of these issues is just wrong. You know, we would need to have full regulatory convergence, and the only way to do that is a single market. And for people who think this is like a non-issue, which seems to be what's being alluded to here, I just ask, put yourself in the shoes of someone who's my age, who's Northern Irish, who's grown up having, you know, identity that looks both ways, who's grown up with peace, and imagine how this discussion feels to them of people dismissing concerns about the Northern Irish border. I think that's really, really unfair.
All right, just one thing. Are you going to join Jacob Rees-Mogg when he goes on that boat and to discard the fish?
Joe, I'm not so sure my sea legs are that good to be going up and down on a trawler on the Thames, throwing fish fingers into the Thames. No, it's not jubilati quite for Jacob Rees-Mogg, but it's semi-jubilati.
Thank you for that. Now